I never imagined a pair of cufflinks would unravel a decade and 2 years of marriage. The strangest part, perhaps, the most insidious detail, was that they weren't mine. I have never, not once in my life, worn cufflinks. I am, by nature, a man of utility, of quiet solutions. The roll up your sleeves, fix the garbage disposal type. Nothing ostentatious, nothing to draw attention. But that night, beneath the glittering chandeliers of the Moonridge Hotel ballroom, I stared at them, gleaming with an arrogant luminescence on another man's wrists. He danced with my wife, a seamless, practiced intimacy that suggested weeks of careful rehearsal. I should perhaps introduce myself. My name is Merrill. Yes, I know, an unusual name. Blame my grandmother. I'm 41, originally from the quiet plains of Nebraska, but I've carved out a life in Dalton Springs, Arizona since marrying a girl named Karen Blake, though now she insists on being called Corey. She possesses this laugh, sharp and effortless, like the unexpected chime of wind bells in a gathering storm, a sound that invariably turns heads in a room. I used to be the architect of that laugh, but somewhere between the relentless demands of raising a daughter, replacing the roof twice over, and the sudden, brutal shock of losing my job during the corporate restructuring last year, I suppose I simply faded into the background, an invisible fixture in her increasingly vibrant foreground. Last Friday, Corey, with an uncharacteristic casualness, invited me to a benefit gala her office was co-hosting. I was genuinely surprised she even mentioned it. Typically, my presence at her professional events was actively discouraged, deemed somehow incompatible. "It might be good for both of us to go," she'd said, her voice chipper, almost forcibly so. I, foolishly, mistook that forced optimism for hope. I deeply regret that miscalculation. I borrowed a blazer from my neighbor, mine having grown too snug around the shoulders, a subtle testament to the quiet, unnoticed changes in my own life. I tried to tame the wild, rebellious hair at the back of my neck in the mirror, even rehearsed a practiced smile, a fragile attempt to convince myself, and perhaps others, that I still belonged by her side. The venue itself was a temple of opulence. Gleaming marble floors, crystal champagne flutes clinking like expensive secrets, and a sea of people in suits that undoubtedly cost more than my monthly mortgage. I felt like an unwitting extra, a misplaced character who had stumbled onto a movie set where I clearly hadn't been cast. Corey, however, was stunning. Television stunning. A sleek black backless dress, her hair swept up in some intricate architectural knot, her perfume enveloping me in a suffocating wave of memory overload. She barely acknowledged my presence as we walked in. My gut, that ancient, visceral warning system, screamed dissonance the moment her gaze found him. Tall, impeccably dressed in a dark, tailored suit, polished shoes that gleamed like obsidian, and those damn cufflinks, silver, etched with some obscure crest or emblem I didn't recognize. He stood by the bar, leaning with an effortless, practiced casualness, a glass of something amber swirling in his hand. Corey's posture shifted, subtly, irrevocably, the instant she saw him. Straighter, more alert, as if the very laws of gravity somehow rearranged themselves around his presence. I asked her who he was. She mumbled, "Just a colleague." "Relax, Merrill," she added, her voice a forced lightness. "Just relax." Minutes later, they were dancing. Not a polite, formal two-step, not a jovial group number, but slow, intentional, intimately close. His hand settled on the small of her back with a terrifying familiarity, as if it belonged there, and she was smiling. That smile, the one I hadn't seen directed at me in well over a year. I stood there, an absurd, humiliated figure, clutching a half-warmed drink, pretending to meticulously read a silent auction list pinned to the wall. My ears burned with a shameful heat. My hands, suddenly foreign, didn't know where to rest. People drifted by, some casting fleeting glances, their expressions betraying a knowing amusement, as if I were the punchline to a long-running joke. I yearned to simply vanish, to dissolve into the marble floor. When the song finally ended, I caught her arm gently, a desperate, almost pleading touch as she passed by, already on her way back to the dance floor. "Can we talk for a second?" I whispered, my voice thick with unspoken urgency. Corey looked at me, her expression one of barely veiled irritation, as if I was asking to borrow her car keys at an inconvenient moment. "If you go back out there and dance with him again, then we're going to have a—" She rolled her eyes, her impatience a sharp, audible sigh. "A serious what, Meryl?" My words caught in my throat, freezing there, because in that moment I didn't even know how to finish that devastating sentence. Conversation? Breakdown? An ending? But she didn't wait. She simply turned, walked, and danced, and I stood there, watching, knowing, with a gut-wrenching certainty that something fundamental had irrevocably shifted between us.
That was the precise moment I realized she no longer cared if I was watching. Perhaps, a chilling thought, she wanted me to. But what would come next? I knew with a certainty that settled like ice in my veins, I wasn't ready. I didn't wait for her to finish the second dance. I walked out, not dramatically, not in a storm of angry footsteps, but like a man who has suddenly realized he has forgotten his place in the story. Like an extra on a film set who has just figured out the camera was never, ever pointing at him. I found a discreet side exit and stepped into the cool night air, where the dull roar of the gala faded behind a wall of thick, manicured hedges, only the faint, melancholic strains of soft jazz leaking through the polished glass. I stood in the vast, empty parking lot, pretending to scroll through my phone, even though I wasn't checking anything. I just needed to project the illusion of belonging somewhere. The truth was, I didn't want anyone to see my face. My own skin felt foreign, alien. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I almost left, got into the car, key halfway in the ignition, but some misplaced, deeply ingrained sense of decency, of duty, held me back. She was still my wife. We had driven here together. I wasn't going to simply walk away that easily. Not yet. The passenger door opened abruptly. She slid in, clutching her phone, her eyes blazing with an almost righteous indignation, as if I were the one who had publicly embarrassed her. "You just left," she snapped, her voice sharp with accusation. "At my event? Seriously?" I didn't answer immediately. I simply looked at her, not in anger, not in panic, just with a profound, aching confusion. "Corey, what are you doing with that guy?" She scoffed, a dismissive sound. "You mean Owen? He's a director. He's important, Meryl. We were making connections." "Is that what they're calling it now?" I said, the cutting sarcasm escaping before I could retrieve it, instantly regretting the bitter tone. Her glare shifted, hardening into something colder, more defiant. "Don't do that." "I watched you," I said, my voice low, steady. "I watched you dance with him like he was the only person in the entire room. You didn't even look at me. Not once." Her silence, profound and damning, spoke more than any hollow apology ever could have. "You didn't want me there," I continued, the words a painful, undeniable truth. "You invited me to play the part of the dutiful husband on a leash, a convenient prop so the office wouldn't talk, but you didn't want me. Not really." She looked away, her gaze fixed on the anonymous darkness beyond the car window. "This isn't the place to talk about this." "So when is the place, Corey?" I pressed, the anger finally simmering to the surface. "Because if I hadn't said anything, you would have kept dancing, kept smiling, perhaps even followed him upstairs if no one stopped you." That finally pierced her carefully constructed nonchalance. Her eyes snapped to mine, defensive and sharp. "How dare you accuse me of—" "Because I'm not blind," I snapped back, my voice rising. "You treat me like a houseplant, something decorative in the background. I sit in silence while you sparkle for strangers and come home smelling of a perfume I never bought you." That for a moment silenced her, but only for a moment. "Then why are you still here, Meryl?" she whispered, almost a dare, her voice laced with a dangerous challenge. "Why do you keep pretending we're something we're not?" And there it was, not a confession, not an apology, but something far, far worse. An admission that this was not merely a fleeting moment of weakness. This, she was saying, was the new normal, and she had already seamlessly adjusted. I wanted to yell. I wanted to cry. I wanted to demand she explain how we had journeyed from honeymoon road trips through the majestic Rockies to sitting at a sterile hotel parking lot like two exquisitely dressed strangers clinging to the flimsy pretense that we still had something to lose. But I did none of these things. Instead, I simply started the car. We rode home in an absolute, suffocating silence. She didn't utter a single word, not when we pulled into the familiar driveway, not when we stepped inside our once-shared home, not even when I walked upstairs alone into the desolate guest room. That night I lay in bed, my eyes open, staring into the silent darkness until the first pre-dawn light pierced the window, and something fundamental shifted in me. Not merely sadness, not even rage, something deeper, colder, something that told me with absolute certainty that I needed to know the unvarnished truth.
And that, I understood, meant systematically uncovering what she was so meticulously hiding behind that man, that dance, and that brittle lie she dared to call our marriage. What I discovered next would force me to question every single belief I had ever held. I didn't sleep that night. Not truly. I stayed in the guest room, or as we used to affectionately call it, the junk room, back before the vibrant tapestry of our lives had faded into this suffocating silence. I sat on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, the gala tie still a constricting noose around my neck, forgotten in my turmoil. I stared at the floor, at the wall, at nothing, just the relentless loop of images playing in my head, that dance, that dismissive smirk, that damn pair of cufflinks. By 4 a.m., I finally surrendered the pretense of sleep. I stood, walked into the hallway, and looked at our bedroom door. It was closed. No sounds, no movement, just a thin wooden barrier separating a man who was unraveling, piece by agonizing piece, and a woman who had, emotionally, already departed, even if her physical presence remained. That's when I saw it. Her phone. Lying on the hallway dresser, she always kept it glued to her hand, an extension of her very being. But for once, there it was, unattended, glowing softly under the dim nightlight. I wish I could claim I hesitated. I didn't. My hands moved with a speed that outpaced my conscience. I picked it up, unlocked it, she hadn't changed the passcode in years, and opened her messages. The first thread that popped up was labeled with a single damning word: Owen. I opened it. I should have stopped. I should have thrown the phone across the room, shattering the fragile illusion, and pretended I hadn't seen anything. But I kept reading, compelled by a desperate, insatiable need to know whether I was truly losing my mind or if she had meticulously driven me to the brink of insanity by gaslighting me into believing our marriage was fundamentally intact. The first message was from that very night, just hours before we left for the gala. Owen. You sure bringing him is a good idea? Corey. He's harmless. Besides, it keeps appearances up. Owen. I don't want to hold back tonight. Corey. Then don't. He'll get the message eventually. My stomach churned, a nauseating lurch. My hands went cold, but I kept scrolling. More texts, late nights, pictures. Nothing explicitly graphic, nothing that would breach ethical guidelines, but undeniably intimate. Him holding her hand across a dimly lit table. A shot of his expensive watch resting casually beside her wine glass. One of her in a mirror, her blouse partially unbuttoned, clearly taken in the sterile privacy of an office bathroom. Weeks of this, months perhaps. She had meticulously constructed an entire second world. A world where I simply didn't exist, except as a convenient prop, a flimsy cover, an empty shell. The worst, most devastating part was the realization I could glean from her own words. She wasn't actually in love with Owen. She wasn't chasing grand passion or heady romance. She was, in her own profoundly selfish way, chasing freedom, an identity that didn't involve me. She had, in essence, stepped out of our life together and simply never bothered to look back. At 5:12 a.m., she walked into the hallway. I didn't hear her footsteps. My senses were too dulled by shock, too consumed by the glowing screen in my hands. I didn't have time to put the phone down. She saw it in my hand. She saw my face, and she simply froze. Her mouth opened slightly, a silent "oh" of disbelief, but no sound escaped. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just looked at her, truly looked, and asked, my voice flat, hollow, "How long?" She glanced at the floor, as if performing a complex calculation, as if the answer was a cold, objective equation rather than a profound emotional betrayal. She whispered, "About 4 months, but it wasn't supposed to become a thing. It filled something I didn't know was missing." I laughed then, a brittle, humorless sound, not because it was funny, but because my heart didn't know how else to react to such a casual, devastating admission. I said, "That's poetic," my voice dripping with bitter irony.
You know what I miss, Corey? I miss being missed. I miss being seen. I miss my wife. She took a tentative step forward. Meryl, I didn't mean— No, I interrupted, my voice sharp, unforgiving. You meant every word. You just weren't supposed to find out. I was supposed to stay invisible, but now I'm not. She reached for my hand. I stepped back. That moment, that profound silence between us felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. And then, as if on cue, her phone buzzed in my palm. Another message. From Owen. So, did he figure it out, or is he still playing house? She didn't deny it. She didn't snatch the phone away. She didn't cry. She simply turned and walked back into the bedroom, closing the door softly behind her. And in that quiet, devastating moment, I realized something that scared me more than the messages ever could. She wasn't sorry. Not for the affair, not for the deception, not even for the raw, visceral pain she had inflicted upon me. She was only sorry that I had finally stopped pretending. I didn't sleep that morning either. The hours after I read those messages, after she saw me holding her phone, were a blurring, painful haze of blank walls and whispered thoughts I couldn't shut off. I sat on the edge of the guest bed again, staring at my suitcase, wondering if I should simply start packing, wondering what you even take when you're leaving a life behind. What qualifies as yours when the person you loved has already mentally, emotionally relocated to someone else's arms? Around 7:30 a.m., I heard her stirring in the kitchen. She was making breakfast. Breakfast. The woman I had just caught exchanging secret, flirtatious text with a man who so casually referred to me as furniture had the audacity to fry eggs as if we were any other married couple on any other sleepy weekend morning. I heard the coffee maker sputter to life, the one I had bought her on our 8th anniversary, steam hissing like it was angry too, a sympathetic manifestation of my own silent rage. I didn't want to go down there, but something deep within me, a compelling, almost masochistic need, drew me. Perhaps to see if she would lie to my face again. Perhaps just to prove to myself that she was real, and not some cruel, elaborate dream. When I walked into the kitchen, she didn't look up immediately. She slid an egg onto a plate and said, her voice unnervingly normal, "Do you want toast?" I just stared at her. Her hair was messy, still caught in that intricate knot from the gala. She was wearing an oversized sweatshirt, mine actually, and she had the same face I married, only now it felt like I was looking at a stranger wearing my wife's skin. "You're making toast?" I asked quietly, the absurdity of the moment almost overwhelming. She nodded, as if nothing was amiss. "Figured you might be hungry." Hungry? That was the word she chose? Not sorry, not please talk to me, not even let's fix this, just breakfast. I read everything, Corey. You can't just feed me eggs and make it go away. She finally looked at me,
leaning slightly against the counter as if this were just another Saturday morning, another ordinary conversation. "I know," she said. There was no fear in her voice, no apology, no tears, just a cold, almost detached resignation, as if she had already meticulously rehearsed this moment in her mind and was now merely living out a predetermined script. I sat down across from her at the kitchen table, my hands resting on the wood I had meticulously sanded and stained myself 6 years ago. That table had witnessed countless family dinners, held numerous birthday cakes, bore the weight of triumphant report cards, and suffered the occasional burnt lasagna. And now it bore the weight of betrayal, thick and suffocating in the air between us. "You could have told me," I said, my voice flat, devoid of accusation. She didn't flinch. "You would have left. That was your choice to make." She paused for a fraction of a second, then said something that genuinely broke me, far more than any texts, any dancing, any smile she had bestowed upon Owen. "I didn't think you'd care this much." That single sentence, it was the final, devastating confirmation that I had become utterly invisible to her long before that ballroom. I had faded into such background noise, such an irrelevant fixture, that my heartbreak now seemed to her a mere inconvenience. "You didn't think I'd care?" I said slowly, a bitter, incredulous laugh escaping me. "I've loved you since I was 29, Corey. You think I stuck around through 2 miscarriages, your crippling panic attacks, your complete career pivots just for convenience? I gave you everything. You think I didn't care?" She looked down, tracing an invisible crack in the tile with her bare toe. "I didn't mean it like that." But she did. She just hadn't expected me to hear it. After a long, heavy silence, I finally spoke. "So? What now?" "I don't know," she whispered. "Do we talk to someone? A therapist? Try whatever people try?" I didn't answer. Not right away, because somewhere deep inside, something had shifted again. I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply exhausted, worn thin, tired of being the only one who still desperately believed in something we had clearly both outgrown. "No," I finally said. "We're past therapists." She blinked, surprised. "Then what are we?" I looked at her, and for the first time in over a decade, I said something that felt like pure, unvarnished truth, rather than merely a strategy for survival. "We're 2 people who used to be in love, and now we're just scared of starting over." Her eyes welled for the first time, but I didn't lean in. I didn't reach across the table. I let the moment hang because I didn't trust her tears anymore. I stood up and walked back upstairs. I needed air. I needed space. But most of all, I needed a plan. Because love, it turns out, doesn't disappear in one dramatic night. It dies slowly, meticulously, like toast left too long in the unforgiving heat.
The next few days moved in a strange, agonizing slow motion. Corey, strangely, acted as if we were trapped in some surreal limbo, as if she could simply drift through the house without consequences, as if the air itself wasn't thick with unspoken tension. She still poured herself morning coffee, still checked her emails on the couch, still changed into her gym leggings and departed for a run with clockwork precision. Except now, I no longer inquired where she was really going. I no longer wanted to hear another lie, delivered with that casual, practiced voice she had mastered so well. I began documenting things. I know how that sounds, creepy, desperate, but after 12 years of meticulously constructing a life with someone, the insidious idea that you might need cold, hard evidence to protect yourself from them does something profoundly strange to your soul. It began with receipts. One morning, she left her gym bag by the door, slightly unzipped. Inside, I found a neatly folded bill from a hotel bar 2 towns over, 2 glasses of Pinot Noir, 1 shrimp cocktail. The date meticulously matched the night she had told me she was at a
women's self-defense class. I took a picture. I didn't confront her, not yet. That same evening, I quietly delved into our joint bank account. I hadn't looked at it in weeks, perhaps months. And why would I? She meticulously handled the bills, and we always kept things perfectly even. At least, I thought we did. But there it was, a $273 charge to La Bellina Jewelry, another to Villa Lucero Day Spa, a third to a boutique florist in Ridgefield that specialized in exotic arrangements. She never wore new jewelry around me. She never brought flowers home. And she certainly didn't return from her spa days glowing like someone who had merely received a massage. All those things, they were for him, the man with the cufflinks, the one who danced as if I were a ghost. Every new discovery felt like another floor giving way beneath me, plunging me deeper into the abyss of betrayal. But I wasn't falling anymore. I was preparing. For the first time in years, I was looking at my life without filters, without excuses, without that blind, unwavering loyalty I once wore like a badge of honor. I scheduled an appointment with an attorney, 2 towns over. Not someone from Corey's tightly knit networking bubble, a quiet older man named Vernon Callahan, with wireframe glasses and a refreshingly blunt way of speaking. I brought him a meticulous folder, bulging with everything I had collected: the texts, the receipts, the photos, the meticulously documented bank activity. I expected sympathy, perhaps even a little validation. But Vernon, with a piercing directness, simply looked at me and asked, "Do you want revenge or freedom?" That question hit harder than I had expected, because somewhere deep inside, in a dark, bruised corner of my heart, I did want revenge. I wanted her to hurt the way I hurt, to feel the suffocating loneliness I had swallowed every night while she surreptitiously slipped away into someone else's carefully constructed fantasy. But more than that, I wanted clarity. A clean slate. A version of myself that didn't have to tiptoe around her volatile moods or pretend I wasn't bleeding out inside. "I want out," I told him, my voice firm. He nodded. "Then we'll make sure she doesn't take the house with her when she leaves." When I walked out of Vernon's office, the sun outside felt different. Not warmer, not colder, just real. Sharp, clear, as if I was finally seeing the world through clean glass, instead of the thick, distorting fog of denial. That night, Corey came home late again. Her makeup was meticulously fresher than it should have been for someone who had merely worked late, and her smile vanished the moment her eyes met mine, sitting quietly on the couch. I wasn't watching television. I wasn't scrolling my phone. I was just sitting there, waiting. "We need to talk," I said, calm and flat. She froze, standing in the hallway, like a startled deer, already instinctively planning an escape route. I pointed to the folder, thick with evidence, resting on the coffee table. "I know about Owen. I know about the hotel. I know everything." For the very first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Not sad, not sorry, but a raw, visceral fear. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice a thin whisper. And I just looked at her, this woman I had once believed would grow old beside me, and said the one thing I never thought I'd be able to utter. "Nothing right now." My voice was still calm, still flat, "because I want you to sit in this house, sleep in that bed, and eat those eggs, knowing that I'm already gone. Not physically, not yet, but I've left you emotionally completely, and soon, legally." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out, only a choked, soundless gasp. And for the first time in this entire nightmare, I felt something akin to peace, because the truth wasn't just out. It was mine now. I didn't leave the house right away. That, I knew, would have been too easy for her. She would have skillfully spun the narrative, portraying me as the unstable husband who stormed off, abandoned the marriage, cracked under pressure. But I knew better now. This wasn't about escape. This was about control. Not controlling her, but finally, irrevocably, reclaiming myself, my time, my dignity, my narrative. So I stayed. I ate in silence, slept in silence, moved through the days like a ghost with a pulse, and Corey, she simply didn't know how to deal with it. I wasn't yelling, I wasn't asking questions, I wasn't playing the part of the wounded, pathetic husband who begs for closure. That's what she expected. Instead, I was calculating, not with rage, but with a cold, unwavering patience. I started a slow, systematic clearing of my space, in ways she couldn't possibly track all at once. Not packing, not yet, just removing. Every drawer, every shelf, every closet I touched was left subtly lighter. I scanned old documents, backed up precious photos onto encrypted drives, meticulously moved passwords to a separate, secure account. I began logging out of things, cutting emotional and digital cords, one by one. I even moved my clothes, piece by agonizing piece. A few shirts at a time disappeared into my gym bag, conveniently forgotten in the trunk of my car. Then my favorite pair of boots vanished from the closet, finding a new home under my desk at the office. She didn't notice. Or perhaps she did and was simply too afraid to ask. One morning while she was in the shower, I pulled down the dusty wedding album from the top of the shelf. Not because I missed it, but because I wanted to feel absolutely nothing. I flipped through the pages like a detached stranger. That picture of her at the altar, I used to believe it was the most beautiful moment of my entire life. Now, I merely saw someone smiling, clutching a promise she had no intention of absolutely keeping. After a week of that quiet, devastating confrontation, I scheduled one final call with Vernon. We agreed to serve the divorce papers on a Thursday morning, a day strategically chosen because it was Corey's wellness day, and I knew she would be home alone. I didn't want an audience. I didn't want drama. I just wanted her to open the door and find what she never, ever expected, the ending. But before that meticulously planned day arrived, something else happened, something I was utterly unprepared for. Our daughter came home. Jenna. She's 20, in college 3 states away, immersed in the world of interior design. She hadn't been back in months. She texted me the day before. "Surprise visit. Just for the weekend. Don't tell Mom." My stomach plummeted, a cold knot of dread. I didn't want her to walk in on this devastating mess. She still cherished a pristine image of us as a cute, enduring older couple. She still proudly bragged to her friends about how her parents had managed to stay married when everyone else is divorced. She didn't know the intricate cracks had widened into gaping, irreparable chasms. When she arrived, Corey, with a chilling proficiency, acted as if everything were perfectly, idyllically normal. She hugged her, made lasagna, even unearthed the dusty board games from the hall closet, playing the part of the devoted mother in a happy family. And Jenna, radiant and oblivious, was glowing, laughing, regaling us with stories about dorm life, eccentric professors, and some guy named Travis she wasn't quite ready to call her boyfriend yet. And I sat there, nodding, smiling, playing along, knowing, with a bitter certainty, that I was about to tear the very foundation of her childhood apart in less than 48 hours.
That night, Jenna asked if she could sleep in her old room. I helped her unpack a small overnight bag, listen to her eclectic playlist of acoustic covers and inexplicable TikTok songs, and bid her good night. As I closed the door softly behind me, I lingered in the hallway for a long time, staring at the picture frames that lined the walls. Family vacations, snow days, birthday cakes, a life meticulously built on cherished memories that now, jarringly, no longer matched the desolate present. Corey walked out of our bedroom, wrapped in her robe. She whispered, her voice laced with a desperate plea, "You're not really doing this, are you? Not with Jenna here." I looked at her, truly as if I had never seen her before. "I didn't choose the timing. You chose everything else." She bit her lip, perhaps hoping to conjure tears, perhaps even hoping I would, inexplicably, relent. But I didn't. Because you don't get to cheat, to lie, and then ask for a postponement because the optics aren't ideal. I turned away and walked down the stairs, leaving her standing there in profound, echoing silence. That was the night I finalized my plan. Because I wouldn't just hand her a folder anymore. I was going to hand her the future, the one she had so meticulously created without me. And then finally, I would walk away from the woman who had forgotten I existed, even while standing right in front of her. The morning I handed her the envelope, the sky was a muted, heavy gray. Not a dramatic, cinematic gray, but that quiet, overcast stillness that settles over a neighborhood just before a rainstorm. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding the same coffee mug I'd held 1,000 times before, the chipped one from that road trip to Oregon we took, back when things still felt profoundly simple. It suddenly felt like I was holding an artifact from a long-bid civilization. Corey walked in, wearing jeans and a tank top, her hair still wet from a shower. Jenna was upstairs, blissfully unaware, getting ready to meet an old high school friend for brunch, just a few feet above the war about to erupt beneath her. I didn't say a word. I simply placed the envelope on the counter, precisely between us. She stared at it. Her fingers hovered over the sealed flap as if it might physically burn her. "What is this?" she asked, her voice low but sharp, accusatory. "You know what it is," I said. She didn't open it right away. She just looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something raw in her eyes. Not guilt, not shame. Fear, yes, but not the kind that comes from loss. It was the fear of being seen without her mask. "Don't do this," she said quietly. "Not while Jenna is here." I didn't plan for her to visit, but I'm not waiting another day to pretend we're something we're not. She finally tore open the envelope, her hands trembling just enough for me to notice. As she skimmed the pages, the official filing, the date stamp, the outline of terms I'd meticulously worked on with Vernon, her mouth slowly opened, but no words came out. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for, the question that encapsulated her denial. "Are you really going through with this?" I just nodded. "It's already filed. You'll get a separate notice from your attorney." She set the envelope down and crossed her arms, a defensive posture. "So what, you get to play the victim now after everything I gave up for this family?" I stared at her. The absurdity of her words almost comical. "You didn't give up anything, Corey. You traded me in, silently. You just didn't expect the return policy to work both ways." She blinked. That one landed. "I gave you stability," she said, her voice rising. A desperate last-ditch effort. "Support. Do you think Owen was around for Jenna's visit last year, or when your uncle died? You think he would have helped you hold things together when the company laid you off?"
I felt a sudden heat in my chest. Not anger, but something akin to heartbreak with teeth. "And yet," I said slowly, deliberately, "you were texting him in our house. You were laughing at my expense. You brought me to the party so he could watch you parade around like I didn't exist." She didn't deny it, simply looked away, and then from upstairs, Jenna's voice called out, cheerful and oblivious, "Hey, you guys okay down there?" We both froze. Corey's eyes darted toward the staircase, pure panic crawling across her face.
I saw her next move before she even uttered the words. "You tell her, and I swear I'll never forgive you." That was her play, not an apology, not remorse. Just another desperate warning to preserve her carefully constructed image, even if it meant silencing the painful truth again. "I'm not going to destroy her view of you," I said. "Not today. But someday she's going to ask what happened, and when she does, I'll tell her the truth. All of it." Corey swallowed hard, her face stark. "She'll hate me. Then you'll know how it feels." That was the last thing I said before stepping away from the counter. I went upstairs, knocked on Jenna's door, and told her I'd be heading out for the afternoon, needing some air. She smiled, completely unaware, gave me a hug, and asked me to bring back cookies from the farmer's market if I passed by it. That hug stayed with me all day, a poignant reminder of the version of life I was walking away from, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Later that afternoon, I received a call from Vernon. "Looks like she read the terms," he said flatly. "Her lawyer's already reaching out." "Good," I said. "I want it clean. No kids involved. She doesn't get the house, you keep your retirement accounts. This won't be war unless she makes it one." "She won't," I said. "She only fights when she thinks she can still win." There was a brief pause. Then Vernon said something I didn't expect, something that settled deep within me. "You handled this better than most men I've seen in your situation." I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't proud. I wasn't relieved. I was just profoundly tired. "Thanks," I said. "I'm not sure it feels like handling, but I'm still standing." And that, somehow, was enough. Because I hadn't just served her papers. I'd handed her the very moment she never believed would come. The moment I finally stopped standing in the background of her life. And the moment she realized that the man she thought would never leave already had. 3 months later, the house was irrevocably 9. Officially. And entirely. I mean that, in a deeper, more profound way. The silence that had once felt suffocating had now become a comforting calm. The kitchen, which had once echoed with half-hearted conversations and veiled resentment, was now a space for music, for freshly brewed coffee, for breathing freely. The bedroom, once a museum of broken intimacy, had been meticulously repainted, refurnished, and reclaimed as my own sanctuary. Corey moved out 2 weeks after the papers were finalized. There were no tears, no screaming accusations. She packed quickly and precisely, like a woman checking out of a hotel room she'd overstayed. She didn't hug me goodbye. She didn't ask if I was okay. But as she closed the front door for the very last time, I heard her pause on the porch. She didn't say anything, just lingered for a moment. And then she was gone. Jenna came home again a few weekends after that. I was nervous, unsure of how to frame everything, unsure how much she already suspected. But to my surprise, she didn't seem shocked. She sat across from me with a mug of tea in her hands and said, her voice quiet but firm, "You don't have to explain, Dad. I saw it coming a long time ago. I just didn't want it to be true." I nodded. I didn't want it to be true either. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you." That sentence, so simple, so unprompted, shattered something in me in the best way possible. Not because I desperately needed validation, but because for the first time in years I felt like I had shown up for myself, and someone truly saw it. Not long after that, I started hiking again. I met a group that does early morning trail runs every Saturday just outside Dalton Springs. I go for the crisp air, the profound quiet, the meditative rhythm of my own footsteps. The people don't ask many questions, and I don't offer much. But being out there, sweating beneath the towering pine trees, miles from anything that used to define me, it's become my ritual, my sacred release. There's a woman in the group named Elise. She's not flashy, not overly chatty, but she has this remarkable way of listening, really listening. When you talk, she smiles with her eyes, a genuine, understanding light. She doesn't ask about my past, and I don't ask about hers. Not yet. And that's perfectly okay. We've had coffee twice. No pressure, no labels, just two people slowly relearning the sound of laughter without any hidden weight attached to it. Some nights I sit on the porch with a book and a blanket, and I look up at the vast, star-strewn sky. I used to do that with Corey, back in the early, innocent years. We'd make wishes, whisper impossible dreams, forge unbreakable promises. Now I just breathe, and give thanks that I had the courage to finally walk away from a love that no longer loved me back. And the beautiful, unspoken truth, I didn't fall apart. I found myself, one quiet, painful, ultimately liberating step at a time. If you're reading this, if you're sitting in a marriage that feels more like a carefully orchestrated performance than an authentic partnership, I won't tell you what to do, but I will say this. You don't have to stay invisible just because someone got used to not looking at you. You're allowed to matter, even if it starts with something as simple as saying nothing and finally walking away.